The first knock came at 2:13 a.m. It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent, just 3 slow, perfectly even knocks against the motel door. Emily Carter opened her eyes and stared into the darkness for several seconds without moving. Rain hammered against the window while strong winds dragged streams of water across the glass. Outside, the old neon motel sign flickered an eerie blue. Pine Creek Motor Inn. The letter R had burned out years ago, leaving only Pine Seek. Emily was still wearing her jeans and sweater. She had only planned to rest for an hour before continuing her drive to Denver. But the storm had become far worse than the forecast had promised. Her phone displayed, no service battery, 11%. The knocking came again. 3 slow knocks. Exactly the same. Emily sat up. Who's there? Silence. Then a young voice answered from the hallway. Excuse me, ma'am, we need some help. Emily froze. It sounded like a little boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. She glanced at the digital clock beside the bed. 2:14 a.m. 2 children in the middle of the night, at an old roadside motel? None of it made any sense. She walked quietly toward the door but kept her hand away from the lock. Where are your parents? They aren't here. This time it was a little girl speaking. Her voice was softer. Younger. Could you please let us in? It's cold outside. Emily leaned toward the peephole. 2 children stood beneath the dim yellow hallway light. The boy was thin, wearing a dark hooded jacket. The girl was shorter, wrapped in a pale raincoat. Their clothes were soaked. Water dripped steadily onto the faded hallway carpet. Both children kept their heads lowered, making it impossible to see their faces. You need to go to the front office, Emily said. The manager's building is near the entrance. He won't open the door. I'll call the police. She picked up her phone, fully aware there was no signal. Silence returned. She looked through the peephole again. The children hadn't moved. They weren't even shivering, they simply stood there beneath the flickering hallway light. Miss Emily, the boy said quietly, you need to let us in. A chill ran through her body. She had never told them her name. Emily slowly stepped away from the door. How do you know my name? The boy slowly raised his head. First she saw his pale face, then his eyes. There were no whites. No irises. Only endless blackness. Like 2 empty holes where eyes should have been. Emily covered her mouth before she could scream. The little girl lifted her head as well. Her eyes were exactly the same. Pitch black. Completely lifeless. We can't come inside unless you invite us, the boy said. His lips barely moved, so just tell us we can come in. Emily backed away another step. Go away. The children remained perfectly still. You don't want us staying out here, the boy continued calmly. You're a good person. Leave. This time she nearly shouted. Instantly, every light inside the room went out. The television shut off. The air conditioner died. Only the cold blue flashes from the broken motel sign outside continued to pulse through the window. Then she heard it. The doorknob, slowly turning downward. The lock held. The handle returned to its original position. Please, the little girl whispered. The voice didn't sound like it came from the hallway anymore. It sounded impossibly close, as if she were standing inside the room right beside the bed. Emily grabbed the table lamp, even though it no longer worked, and backed toward the window. 3 knocks echoed through the hallway again. Then 3 more. Not on the door. On the window behind her. Emily turned her head very slowly. Her room was on the 2nd floor. Outside, pressed against the rain-covered glass, stood the little girl in the pale raincoat. She stared directly at Emily with those endless black eyes, and she was smiling. Then the boy's voice drifted in from the hallway. See? She's almost inside. Emily stumbled backward until her legs hit the bed. The little girl outside never blinked. Rain streamed over the window, yet somehow her face remained perfectly clear, as if the water refused to touch her. Then the motel lights flickered back on. The girl was gone. Emily rushed to the window and threw the curtain aside. Nothing. Only the empty parking lot. Rows of rain-soaked cars. The blue glow of the motel sign. And the endless sound of rain. She grabbed her keys, unlocked the door, and stepped into the hallway. Empty. No children, no wet footprints, no sound except the humming fluorescent lights. Her breathing echoed through the narrow corridor as she hurried toward the stairwell. The motel office was still lit. A warm yellow glow spilled through the front windows. Inside, an elderly man sat behind the reception desk reading an old paperback novel. He looked up before Emily even reached the counter. You saw them. It wasn't a question. Emily struggled to catch her breath. There were 2 children. I know. They knew my name. I know. They were outside my second-floor window. For the first time, the old man's face changed. Not surprise. Fear. He slowly stood up and walked to the front door. Without opening it, he looked outside into the rain. Then he quietly locked the deadbolt. Another lock. Then another. Only after checking all 3 did he return. My name's Walter. I've owned this motel for 32 years. And I've seen them 4 times. Emily stared at him. What are they? Walter remained silent for several seconds. Finally he spoke. I don't know. But I know what they want. They want permission. Emily crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. Permission for what? To come inside. Why? Walter slowly shook his head. No one ever finds out. He opened an old wooden drawer beneath the counter and carefully placed a faded newspaper clipping on the desk. The paper had yellowed with age. The headline read, Local family found dead inside, their home no signs of forced entry. Walter pointed to a photograph beneath the headline. 2 parents. A teenage daughter. A little boy. They all died in their sleep. Emily frowned. What does that have to do with those children? Walter slid another newspaper across the counter. Then another. And another. Different years, different towns, different states. Every article ended the same way. No signs of forced entry, doors locked, windows locked, entire families dead. Emily felt her stomach tighten. What happened to them? No one knows. Walter's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But every survivor tells the same story. He leaned closer. They heard knocking. Outside thunder rolled across the mountains. The motel lights dimmed again. Walter looked toward the rain-covered windows. Then he whispered the words so quietly Emily almost didn't hear them. They always come during storms. They always ask politely. And they never force their way inside. Emily looked back at the newspapers. Every article had one detail circled in red ink. A neighbor reported hearing children outside the house shortly before dawn. Walter folded his hands. I've been waiting 15 years for them to come back. Emily looked up. What? They never visit the same place twice. He gave a tired smile. Until tonight. The office phone suddenly rang. Both of them jumped. Walter slowly picked up the receiver. Pine Creek Motel. Silence. His face lost all color. No, a pause. I told you never to answer them. He lowered the receiver without hanging it up. Emily swallowed. Who was it? Walter stared toward room 17. The woman in room 22. What did she say? Walter's hands were shaking. She said, he looked directly into Emily's eyes. There are 2 children knocking on her door. Before Emily could say another word, the office phone rang again. The sharp sound echoed through the empty lobby. Walter didn't even look at it. He stood perfectly still, staring at the front door. The phone continued ringing, once, twice, a third time. Finally he picked it up. Yes. The color drained from his face almost instantly. No, don't open the door. A pause. Listen to me very carefully. No matter what they say, do not invite them inside. A terrified scream burst through the receiver. It was loud enough for Emily to hear. Then silence. The line went dead. Walter slowly lowered the handset. What happened? For several seconds he didn't answer. Finally, he whispered, I think. She opened the door. At that exact moment, every light inside the motel went out. The office disappeared into darkness. Only flashes of lightning illuminated the room every few seconds. After a long moment, the emergency lights flickered on. A dim red glow filled the hallways. Walter grabbed a ring of keys from beneath the counter. Stay here. No. It's dangerous. I'm not staying alone. He hesitated for only a second before nodding. Together they hurried up the staircase toward the second floor. The hallway felt unnaturally quiet. Too quiet. The rain outside had almost completely disappeared. It was as if someone had muted the storm. Room 22 stood slightly open. A faint light flickered inside. Walter slowly pushed the door open. The room was empty, the bed had never been slept in. A cup of coffee still steamed on the nightstand. A cell phone lay on the floor. But the woman was gone. How? Emily whispered. I don't know, Walter answered quietly. They searched every corner. The window was locked. There was no balcony. The bathroom was empty. The closet stood open, nothing. The only thing left behind was a pair of tiny wet footprints, bare feet. Child-sized, they began at the doorway and ended in the middle of the room. As if whoever made them had simply vanished. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. That's impossible, Walter didn't respond. He had seen this before. Then a child's laughter echoed from the far end of the hallway. Soft, almost playful. Emily turned. Two small figures stood beside the old vending machine, the boy and the little girl. This time, their faces were fully visible beneath the emergency lights. Their skin was unnaturally pale. Their eyes remained completely black. But what frightened Emily most wasn't their appearance. It was their smiles. Calm, patient, almost human. "Miss Emily," the boy said softly, "we only asked for help." Emily instinctively stepped backward. "What are you?" The boy tilted his head. "We used to be like you. A very long time ago." A cold wave swept through Emily's body. "What does that mean?" The little girl answered in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Once, no one opened the door for us." The hallway suddenly became colder. The ceiling lights began flickering, one after another, as though something unseen was slowly moving above them. Walter suddenly shouted, "Don't look into their eyes." But it was already too late. Emily was staring directly at them. The blackness inside the boy's eyes seemed to grow deeper. It wasn't simply darkness. It moved, as if there were another place hidden behind them. Then Emily heard a voice. Not outside, inside her own mind. "You've already invited us." She stumbled backward. "No, you agreed to help us." "No, that's enough." Walter grabbed her arm and pulled her away with all his strength. At that exact second every light went out. The hallway disappeared into absolute darkness. Then 3 slow knocks echoed through the silence. Not on a door, not on a window. They came from inside the wall itself. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Not the kind caused by a power outage. This darkness felt alive, heavy, almost solid. Emily couldn't even see her own hand in front of her face. Then, 3 knocks. Somewhere to her left, 3 more. Behind her. Another 3. Above them. Walter's voice came through the darkness. "Don't answer. Don't speak. No matter what you hear." Emily held her breath. For a moment, everything became silent. Then a familiar voice whispered behind her. "Emily," she froze. It was her mother's voice, exactly as she remembered it. Gentle, warm. Impossible. Her mother had died 8 years earlier. "Emily, I'm cold. Please, open the door." Emily's eyes filled with tears. No, another voice. This one belonged to her younger brother. It's me, I'm scared. Why won't you help me?" Walter grabbed her wrist tighter. "None of those voices are real. But they know everything you've ever loved." The voices multiplied. Her father. Old friends. Her college roommate. Every person she had ever lost. Each one begging for help. Each one asking to be let inside. Emily pressed both hands over her ears. It didn't matter. The voices weren't coming from outside. They were inside her mind. Then the emergency lights flickered back on. The hallway was empty. The children were gone. Walter didn't relax. "They're still here." He pointed toward the vending machine. Its glass reflected the hallway. Emily looked. She saw herself. Walter beside her. The empty corridor. But in the reflection, 2 children stood directly behind them. Emily spun around. Nothing. She looked back at the glass. The children hadn't moved. The boy slowly smiled. Then, for the first time, he blinked. When his eyes opened again, they were completely normal. Blue, human. He looked terrified. He slammed both hands against the inside of the vending machine's glass. Not trying to get in. Trying to get out. Emily's heart stopped. "What?" The little girl appeared beside him. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was crying. She pounded desperately against the glass. Neither of them looked evil. They looked trapped. The boy mouthed 4 silent words. "Don't let them," before he could finish. The reflection shattered into darkness. The vending machine's glass exploded. Thousands of tiny fragments scattered across the hallway. The lights went out again. Something moved behind Emily. Not footsteps, not breathing. Just movement, slow. "Impossible." Walter shouted, "Run." They sprinted toward the stairwell. Behind them came the sound of children's footsteps. Not running, walking, slowly, patiently, as if they already knew exactly where Emily was going. Walter slammed the heavy fire door behind them. The footsteps stopped immediately, silence. Then 3 slow knocks. From the other side of the steel door, Walter looked at Emily. His face had gone completely pale. They've never followed anyone this far before. Emily stared at the door. Why me? Walter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the motel office downstairs. Then he whispered something that made her blood run cold. They didn't come here tonight because of you. They came because of me. For several long seconds, Emily couldn't speak. Walter slowly sat down on the stairway. It looked as though he had aged another 10 years in the span of a single minute. What do you mean? She finally whispered. He let out a tired sigh. 20 years ago, I was just like you. 3 slow knocks echoed from the other side of the fire door. Walter didn't even turn around. I was the night clerk here. My father owned this motel. His eyes drifted into the distance, as though he were watching the memories unfold all over again. One stormy night, they knocked. A little boy. And a little girl. Emily remained silent. They were soaked by the rain. Polite. They said they were lost. I almost opened the door. He smiled sadly, but my father stopped me. He knew the legend. He saved my life. Emily glanced toward the steel door. Then why did they come back? Walter lowered his head. My father died 3 weeks ago. Silence filled the stairwell. He was the last person who knew how to keep them away. Then a child's voice drifted through the door. Soft, calm, almost kind. Mr. Walter, we've waited a very long time. A shiver ran down Emily's spine. Walter closed his eyes. I know. You can't hide anymore. I know. Emily grabbed his arm. We can leave. We'll get in the car. We'll just drive. Walter slowly shook his head. They don't come for places. They come for people. Another long silence. Then Walter reached into his jacket and pulled out an old yellowed envelope. My father told me, if this day ever came, I was supposed to give this to whoever survived. Emily carefully opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. Only one sentence had been written on it. Never let fear convince you to open the door. Emily looked up. That's it? Walter nodded. He always said, it was never really about the door. Then what was it about? Walter looked directly into her eyes. It was about the choice. At that exact moment, the heavy fire door slowly began to open by itself, without a sound. Very slowly, beyond it. There was no hallway. No children. Only thick blue fog. And the sound of rain. Walter stood. Don't look back. What are you going to do? For the first time that night he smiled. A calm smile. I'm going to finish what should have been finished 20 years ago. He took one step toward the open doorway, then quietly said, I invite. Emily screamed, no. But it was too late. Walter finished the sentence. Only myself. The fire door slammed shut with incredible force. A freezing wind rushed through the stairwell. The lights instantly came back on. Silence. Complete silence. Emily slowly walked toward the door. Her hands trembled as she pulled it open. No one was there. Not Walter. Not the children. Only the rain-soaked wooden porch outside the motel. 3 months passed. The police never found Walter. Most people believed the old man had simply disappeared. The motel closed permanently. Eventually the property was abandoned. Emily never returned. Almost a year later, she was driving home after work. Rain began falling. Her phone lost its signal. The GPS screen went black. Ahead an old roadside motel appeared through the storm. A flickering blue neon sign glowed in the darkness. Pine Seek Motor Inn. Emily's heart nearly stopped. The building had been demolished months earlier. She drove past without slowing down, without looking back. But as she glanced into her rear-view mirror, she saw an elderly man standing outside the motel office. Walter. He was watching her drive away. Slowly he shook his head, as if warning her, don't stop, don't turn around, don't answer the knocking. That same night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., 3 slow knocks echoed from the front door of her house. Emily never walked to the door. She turned off every light, sat silently in the darkness, and waited for sunrise. Since that night, she checks every lock before going to bed. And she has never looked through a peephole after 2 o'clock in the morning. Because sometimes, whatever is standing outside, isn't waiting for an invitation. It's only waiting for you to answer. People who grow up in the Appalachian Mountains learn certain rules before they learn to drive. Don't follow voices in the forest, don't answer someone calling your name if you can't see them. And above all, never whistle after sunset. Most outsiders laugh when they hear those stories. Ethan Brooks laughed too, until the mountains answered him back. Late October. The last weekend before winter closed the higher trails. Ethan had driven nearly 4 hours from Charlotte to spend 2 days hiking through a remote section of the Appalachian Mountains. He wasn't chasing ghosts. He was chasing photographs. Fog-covered forests. Forgotten cabins, ancient fire towers. Those were the images that filled his travel blog. By late afternoon he reached the trailhead. Only one pickup truck sat in the parking lot. A weathered wooden sign welcomed visitors. Beneath the trail map another hand-painted board caught his attention. It wasn't part of the national park. The letters looked uneven, as though someone had painted them years ago. It read, "If you hear whistling, do not whistle back." Ethan smiled. Creepy marketing. An old ranger stepped out of a nearby cabin. He looked almost 70, gray beard, wide-brimmed hat, weathered hands. "You planning to camp tonight?" Ethan nodded. "Just one night." The ranger studied him for a long moment. "You traveling alone?" "Yeah." The old man sighed. "If you stay after dark, don't whistle." Ethan laughed. "I've already seen the sign. I'm serious." The ranger's expression never changed. "Out here, the mountains sometimes answer." Ethan looked toward the endless pine forest. "You mean echoes?" The ranger slowly shook his head. "No. Echoes repeat your whistle." He paused. "What answers? Always whistles something different." A cold breeze moved through the trees. For just a second the forest became perfectly silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Then the wind returned. The ranger stepped backward toward his cabin. "If you hear it, keep walking. And whatever happens, don't try to find who's making the sound." Ethan thanked him politely. He didn't believe a word of it. By sunset he had already forgotten the warning. Ethan stood perfectly still. The whistling didn't come again. He listened carefully. Only the wind whispered through the pine branches. Nothing else. He let out a quiet laugh. Probably another hiker. He pulled out his phone. No service. Just like before. Ethan sat beside his small camping stove and continued eating dinner. Darkness settled quickly beneath the towering pines. The fog grew thicker with every passing minute. His flashlight barely reached more than a few yards into the trees. About 10 minutes passed. Ethan had almost finished eating when he heard it again. This time much closer. He slowly looked up. The melody was different. Short, slow, almost rhythmic. As if someone were trying to imitate the sound of a person breathing. Ethan stood. "Hello, is somebody out there?" Silence. He picked up his flashlight and swept it across the forest. Nothing. Only endless pine trees, thick fog, and darkness. "No one's funny enough to hike out here just to mess with people," he muttered. He turned back toward his tent. Then crunch. The unmistakable sound of a foot snapping a dry branch. Off to his right. Ethan spun around. The flashlight illuminated nothing except wet tree trunks. No movement. No one. He decided to ignore it. He switched off the camping stove, climbed inside his tent, and zipped it closed. Rain began tapping softly against the canvas. Inside, it felt warm. Safe. At least that's what he kept telling himself. Nearly 30 minutes passed. Ethan was just beginning to drift off to sleep, when the whistling returned. This time it came from just outside the tent. Only a few feet away. He held his breath. The melody lasted only a few seconds. Then silence. Very carefully, Ethan unzipped the tent. He looked outside. Nothing. Fog. Rain. Pine trees. Complete silence. "I'm officially creeping myself out," he whispered with a nervous smile. The moment the words left his mouth, another whistle echoed from deep inside the forest behind him. He spun around. Nothing. Then another whistle. To his left. Then another. To his right. Then one somewhere ahead. The whistles came from every direction, slowly circling the campsite. Each melody was different. Not one of them repeated itself. A chill spread across Ethan's back. Suddenly he remembered the old ranger's warning. An echo repeats your whistle. Whatever answers, always whistles something different. At that exact moment a whistle sounded directly behind him. So close it felt as though someone was standing less than 3 feet away. Ethan spun around. His flashlight illuminated only rain-soaked pine trees, no one. But something else caught his attention. Footprints. Fresh, bare human footprints. They began between the trees, and led straight toward his tent. Ethan slowly lowered the flashlight. The footprints stopped only a few steps away, as if whoever had made them had simply vanished. Then a voice drifted through the darkness, barely louder than a whisper. Ethan, he froze. The voice was unfamiliar, calm, perfectly clear. Don't turn around, his heartbeat thundered in his ears. He tightened his grip on the flashlight. Then a second voice spoke, exactly the same voice. Only this time, it came from directly behind his right shoulder. I'm already here. Ethan didn't move, every instinct told him to turn around. But the ranger's warning echoed in his mind. Whatever happens, don't try to find who's making the sound. His breathing became slow and shallow. Rain continued falling through the pine branches. The whisper behind him disappeared. For a few long seconds nothing happened. Then a whistle. Only one, very soft, from somewhere far ahead. Ethan slowly backed toward his tent without taking his eyes off the forest. The campsite looked exactly the same. His backpack lay beside the fire ring, his camera rested on a folding chair. Nothing seemed disturbed. You're imagining all of this, he told himself. Then his flashlight flickered. Once. Twice, the beam dimmed before returning to normal. At that exact moment, something moved between the trees. Not quickly, a shadow. Tall, too tall. It crossed silently behind one pine tree, and never emerged from the other side. Ethan stared. His heart pounded. There wasn't enough space between the trees for someone to disappear. Yet whatever he had seen was gone. He hurried back into the tent and zipped it shut. His hands trembled as he grabbed his camera. He switched to the photographs he had taken just before sunset. The first few images were normal. The trail, the mountains, the campsite. Then the last photograph. Ethan froze. In the background, half hidden behind a pine tree, stood a human figure. It hadn't been there when he took the picture. The figure was too far away to make out any details. Only a dark silhouette, standing perfectly still, watching him. Ethan quickly zoomed in. The image became blurry, pixelated. But one detail remained perfectly sharp. Its head was tilted. As though it were listening, a sudden whistle burst from directly outside the tent. Loud enough to make Ethan flinch. It wasn't random, it was a melody. One he recognized immediately, his favorite song. The one he used to whistle as a child. His smile disappeared. He had never whistled that tune tonight. Not once. Slowly, very slowly, the melody changed. Now it sounded like his father's favorite tune. A song his father used to whistle while repairing old trucks. His father had died 6 years earlier. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. No, the whistling stopped. Then a familiar voice spoke through the rain. Ethan, his father's voice. Exactly as he remembered it. I'm over here. Come help me. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. It's not real, the voice came again. Closer this time. I'm hurt. I can't find the trail. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek. For one impossible second he wanted to believe it. Then he remembered something. His father had never called him Ethan, only one person did. Everyone else called him EJ. The thing outside didn't know that. Ethan whispered, "You're not him." Silence. Then the whistle returned. But it wasn't trying to sound human anymore. It rose higher, sharper, until it became something impossible. Like hundreds of people whistling in perfect harmony from deep inside the forest. The entire mountain seemed alive. Trees swayed although there was no wind. The ground vibrated beneath the tent. Then every sound stopped at once. Complete silence. Even the rain had disappeared. Ethan slowly looked toward the tent wall. A shadow passed across the fabric, not walking. Gliding. Too tall to be human. It circled the tent once, then stopped. Directly outside the entrance. A long pause followed. Then 3 slow scratches slid down the tent fabric. Not claws, not branches, fingernails. And a calm voice whispered only inches away, "You remembered the wrong name." Ethan didn't move. The whisper faded away. Nothing stirred beyond the tent walls. A few seconds passed. Then a full minute. Gradually, the forest came alive again. Rain whispered through the pine branches. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called into the darkness. Ethan slowly exhaled. It's over, but he didn't believe his own words. He didn't even try to sleep. For the rest of the night, He sat inside the tent, gripping his flashlight with both hands. His watch read 3:41 a.m. Time seemed to have stopped. Every few minutes he checked his phone. No service. The battery still showed 18%. It never changed. As though time itself had frozen inside the tent. Around 4 in the morning, the whistling returned. But this time it sounded different. Slower. Sad. Almost human. Carefully, Ethan unzipped the tent and looked outside. The fog had grown even thicker. His flashlight illuminated only a few feet ahead. Then he saw them. People. Standing silently between the trees. One, then another. Then dozens more. None of them moved. None of them looked at each other. Every one of them was staring directly at Ethan. He narrowed his eyes. They were all dressed differently. Modern hiking jackets. Old hunting clothes. Raincoats. Some carried flashlights. Others wore backpacks. They looked like ordinary people who had simply gotten lost. The whistling drifted somewhere among them. Yet none of them moved their lips. Suddenly one of the figures stepped forward. Then another step. Then another. It was a young man. Around 30 years old. His face was pale. Exhausted. He stopped several yards from Ethan. "Don't listen to it," he whispered. Ethan stared. "Who are you?" The man ignored the question. "If it starts whistling your melody, run." "What is it?" The man remained silent. His eyes slowly lifted toward the tops of the pine trees. "It doesn't like being imitated." At that exact moment, a whistle echoed nearby. Very close. The young man's face filled with terror. "He found you." The fog suddenly thickened. Within seconds the man disappeared. Simply vanished. The other figures were gone as well. The forest stood empty once again. Ethan couldn't stay any longer. He packed his gear as fast as he could, collapsed the tent, threw his backpack over his shoulder, and started walking toward the trailhead. Dawn couldn't be far away. He remembered the trail perfectly, at least he thought he did. 20 minutes passed. The forest grew denser. The trail refused to end. Ethan slowed to a stop. That fallen tree, it hadn't been there before. Or had it? No. He was certain. He had already walked past it once. He pulled a compass from his backpack. The needle spun slowly in circles, never pointing north. His phone still showed no signal. The offline map refused to load. Ethan started walking faster, then running. But the farther he ran, the more familiar the forest became. Finally he stopped. His campsite stood directly ahead. His tent was fully assembled, exactly as it had been the previous evening. His camping stove sat beside it. His metal mug rested near the fire ring. Even his backpack was lying on the ground. Yet he was still wearing it. Ethan slowly turned around. Every pine tree looked identical. The fog swallowed everything beyond a few yards. Then far away deep within the endless forest, a whistle echoed through the mountain. This time it was whistling the exact melody Ethan had carelessly whistled just after sunset. The forest wasn't answering anymore. The forest had remembered. Ethan stood frozen. His campsite, exactly as he had left it the night before. The tent was fully assembled. The camping stove sat beside the fire ring. His backpack rested on the ground. Yet he was still wearing his backpack. His breathing became uneven. Slowly he looked over his shoulder. The trail behind him had disappeared. Only endless pine trees remained. Every direction looked exactly the same. The forest had erased the way out. Then a whistle echoed through the fog, closer than before. Not frightening, not aggressive, almost inviting. It was his own melody, perfectly reproduced. Every note, every pause. Ethan took an unconscious step toward the sound, then stopped. The ranger's warning came back to him. "Don't follow the whistle." Another whistle answered. This one from his left, then another. Behind him. Within seconds the entire forest was whistling. Not randomly, one melody after another. Every tune Ethan had ever known. Songs from childhood, campfire songs, Christmas melodies. Even jingles from television commercials. Somehow the forest knew them all. A familiar voice suddenly drifted through the trees. Ethan closed his eyes. His father, again. Only this time the voice was different, gentler. "I'm waiting for you. You don't have to be afraid." Ethan's hands trembled. He whispered to himself, "It's not him." The forest answered immediately. "No, it isn't." Silence. Then another voice. The old ranger. "If you can still hear me, don't answer." Ethan's eyes opened. The ranger was standing several yards away between the pines. His flashlight hung from one hand. Rain soaked his jacket. He looked exhausted. "Ethan, walk toward my voice. Don't look anywhere else." Without thinking, Ethan took one careful step, then another. The ranger never moved. He simply waited. After several minutes, Ethan finally reached him. Or at least he thought he had. The ranger slowly smiled. Something about the smile felt wrong. Too wide. Too still. Then he whistled. One short note. It wasn't the ranger. Ethan stumbled backward. The old man's face didn't change. But his eyes slowly became completely black. His smile widened impossibly. The thing wearing the ranger's face whispered, "You almost answered." At that exact moment, a gunshot exploded through the mountain. The figure vanished instantly. A real flashlight beam swept across the trees. "Ethan," a voice shouted. "Ethan!" The old ranger came running through the forest. Breathing heavily, very much alive. He grabbed Ethan's shoulders. "Don't stop. We have to leave." They ran together. Branches whipped across their faces. The whistling grew louder behind them. Hundreds of melodies echoed through the trees. Some laughed, some cried, some sounded almost human. None belonged to anything alive. Minutes later they burst out of the forest. The parking lot. Morning sunlight. Ethan's car. Everything was exactly where it should have been. He turned around. The forest stood silent, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. The ranger leaned against his truck, catching his breath. "You heard it, didn't you?" Ethan nodded. "It copied everything." The ranger looked toward the mountains. "No. It was learning." 6 months passed. Ethan never returned to the Appalachians. He deleted every photograph from that trip. Except one, the final image. The one with the shadow between the trees. One rainy evening. He opened the photograph again. Something had changed. The shadow was gone. Instead, a man stood there, wearing Ethan's jacket. Ethan's backpack, looking directly into the camera. Whistling. At the bottom of the image, words that had never been there before slowly came into focus. "Now it's your turn to answer." That night, at exactly 8:47 p.m., just after sunset, someone outside Ethan's apartment began whistling. It wasn't loud, it wasn't threatening, it was simply his own favorite melody. Ethan walked to the window, then stopped. He closed the curtains, turned off every light, and sat silently until sunrise. Outside, the whistling continued, without stopping, without moving farther away, as though the forest had finally found him, and this time it had no intention of letting him leave. There are places that don't exist on any map, places you aren't supposed to find. The strange part is, they always find you first. Ryan Mitchell had been driving for almost 6 hours. The rain hadn't stopped since sunset. His windshield wipers struggled to keep up as water poured across the highway. The GPS had frozen 30 minutes ago. Its screen now displayed nothing except, searching for signal. His phone wasn't any better. No service. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. Ryan sighed. "I should have stopped back in Ashton." The road stretched endlessly through the Colorado mountain. No houses, no gas stations, no traffic. Just endless rain and towering pine trees disappearing into darkness. Lightning flashed somewhere beyond the hills. For a brief second the entire valley lit up. That's when he saw it. A faded neon sign standing beside the road. Vacancy, the letters buzzed weakly through the rain. Below them stood another weathered sign. Silver Pine, Hotel. Ryan frowned. He had driven this highway before. Several times. He had never seen a hotel here. Still, it was better than spending the night stranded on the roadside. He turned onto the gravel driveway, the tires crunched over wet stones. An old 3-story hotel slowly emerged from the fog. Its architecture looked strangely out of place. Dark wooden balconies, large stone chimney. Warm yellow lights glowing behind every window. It looked untouched by time. Almost beautiful, yet something about it felt wrong. There were no cars in the parking lot. Not one. Only an old black pickup truck covered in rain. Ryan parked beside the entrance. As he stepped outside, the storm suddenly became quieter. Not weaker, quieter. As though the rain itself refused to touch the hotel grounds, he walked toward the front door. The wooden porch didn't creak beneath his feet. The brass handle felt warm. Inside, the lobby looked frozen in another decade. A grandfather clock ticked softly. Wood-paneled walls reflected warm amber light. A fireplace crackled gently. Old leather chairs surrounded it. Jazz music played quietly from somewhere unseen. Ryan smiled. This place is incredible. A bell rang. An elderly woman appeared behind the reception desk. She wore a dark green uniform that looked decades old. Her silver hair was perfectly neat. She smiled politely. "Good evening. Welcome to Silver Pine Hotel." Ryan set his backpack on the counter. "I'd like a room for the night." She opened a large handwritten guest book. Not a computer. Not even a typewriter. Just yellowed pages. She dipped an old fountain pen into ink. "What name should I write?" "Ryan Mitchell." The woman stopped writing, for only a second. Then she smiled again. "I've been expecting you." Ryan laughed. "I think you have the wrong guest." "No." She looked directly into his eyes. "Room 210 has already been prepared." A cold sensation spread across his shoulders. "I never made a reservation." "You didn't have to." The receptionist slowly slid an old brass key across the counter. Unlike every modern hotel, there was no key card. Only a heavy key attached to a faded leather tag. 217. Ryan hesitated, then forced himself to smile. "Guess that's good customer service." The old woman smiled, but something about her expression never reached her eyes. "Breakfast is served at 7. Please don't be late." Ryan picked up the key. "Thanks." "Oh," she added quietly. He turned back. "There is only one rule." Ryan waited. She folded her hands. Her smile disappeared. "If someone knocks after midnight, do not answer." Ryan chuckled. "Why?" The old woman looked toward the staircase, as though she were making sure no one else could hear. Then she whispered, "Because no guest has ever checked in after midnight." She rang the small brass bell once more. Somewhere upstairs, a door slowly opened by itself. Ryan stood at the reception desk for a few more seconds. He couldn't shake the strange feeling that the receptionist had been completely serious. "Don't open the door after midnight," he smiled to himself. Probably just part of the hotel's atmosphere. The old woman said nothing. She simply watched him as he climbed the worn wooden staircase. The second floor was immaculate. A long hallway stretched into the distance, illuminated by warm amber wall lamps. Old black and white photographs hung neatly along the walls. Newlyweds standing in front of the hotel. Vintage automobiles from the 1950s. Families smiling proudly beside the entrance. Ryan slowed his pace. Every photograph showed the same hotel, but none of them looked newer than the early 1970s. He continued walking. Room 2117 was almost at the very end of the corridor. The old brass key turned easily in the lock. The door opened without a sound. The room was surprisingly spacious. Dark wooden furniture. A large king-sized bed. A stone fireplace. An antique radio resting on a small table. Near the window sat an old wooden rocking chair. Everything looked as though time had simply stopped decades ago. "This place is incredible." Ryan dropped his backpack onto the floor. His phone still displayed no service. He searched for an outlet to charge it. There wasn't one. Only old porcelain light switches and cloth-covered electrical wiring running along the walls. "That's strange." He walked toward the window. Dense fog had swallowed most of the parking lot. His sedan was still parked exactly where he'd left it. The only modern vehicle in sight. The old black pickup truck remained beneath the trees. Ryan closed the curtain. The digital clock on his phone read 10:47 p.m. Too early to sleep. He decided to explore the hotel. The lobby looked completely different now. Only minutes earlier, it had been empty. Now it was filled with guests. A middle-aged man quietly read a newspaper beside the fireplace. An elderly couple played chess without speaking. A young woman slowly sipped tea. Two children sat cross-legged on the rug, carefully assembling a jigsaw puzzle. Ryan stopped walking. Where did all these people come from? No one answered. No one even looked at him. The only sounds were the crackling fire, and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock. A door nearby opened. A man about Ryan's age stepped into the lobby. "You just got here too?" Ryan smiled. "Yeah. I'm Chris." "Ryan." They shook hands. Chris glanced around the room. "Strange place, isn't it?" Ryan laughed. "I was just thinking the same thing." Chris lowered his voice. "No internet. No phone signal. But you know something?" Ryan waited. "I'm starting to feel like I don't want to leave." Ryan chuckled. "How long have you been staying here?" Chris frowned. I honestly can't remember. He looked genuinely confused. A day. Maybe 2. I'm not sure. It's hard to keep track of time here. Ryan's smile faded. What room are you in? 214. And you? 217. Chris nodded slowly. That's a nice room. Then he hesitated. If someone knocks on your door tonight, don't answer. Ryan stared at him. The receptionist told me the same thing. Chris slowly shook his head. No. His smile disappeared. The previous guest in my room told me. Ryan frowned. What happened to him? Chris looked toward the staircase. He disappeared. Silence settled over the lobby. Even the grandfather clock stopped ticking. Both men looked at it simultaneously. The hands had frozen. Exactly at 11:11 p.m. At that precise moment, every guest in the lobby slowly turned their heads. At exactly the same speed, they all looked directly at Ryan. Without speaking, without blinking, without a single expression, they simply stared. As if they had been waiting for him. No one moved. The guests simply stared. Their faces were completely expressionless. The man with the newspaper never blinked. The elderly couple had stopped in the middle of a chess move. Even the 2 children sat perfectly still, their hands frozen above the unfinished puzzle. Ryan forced a nervous smile. Good evening. No one answered. Then, the grandfather clock ticked once. The guests immediately returned to whatever they had been doing. The man resumed reading his newspaper. The children continued assembling the puzzle. The elderly couple moved another chess piece. As if nothing had happened. Ryan looked at Chris. What was that? Chris swallowed. I don't know. He didn't sound convincing. Ryan took another look at the clock. It was moving again. 11:12 p.m. Almost as if the previous minute had never happened. I think I'm going back to my room, Ryan said. Chris nodded. Probably a good idea. He started walking toward the stairs, then suddenly stopped. Oh, Ryan turned around. If you wake up tomorrow, Chris smiled weakly. Don't miss breakfast. Before Ryan could ask why, Chris disappeared into the hallway. Room 2117 felt colder than before. Ryan locked the door. Then the deadbolt. Then he dragged the heavy wooden chair beneath the doorknob. He laughed quietly at himself. You're seriously doing this? He wasn't usually superstitious. But something about this hotel made ordinary logic feel strangely unreliable. He checked his phone. Still no signal. 11% battery. No new notifications. He placed it on the bedside table and lay down. Outside the rain had stopped. Not gradually, completely. The silence felt heavier than the storm itself. Ryan eventually closed his eyes. Knock. His eyes snapped open. The room was pitch black. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was. Then, 3 slow knocks. Exactly as the receptionist had described. Ryan looked at his phone. 12:03 a.m. Another knock. A calm voice came from the hallway. Room service. Ryan frowned. I didn't order anything. Silence. Then another voice. Male. Friendly. Mr. Mitchell, you left something downstairs. Ryan sat upright. He hadn't. Everything he owned was inside the room. The voice continued. Your wallet. Ryan instinctively reached into his pocket. His wallet was still there. His heartbeat quickened. Then a different voice. Chris. Ryan. Open the door. I need your help. Ryan jumped out of bed. Chris? No answer. Only breathing. Slow, steady breathing on the other side of the door. Ryan stepped closer. The chair still blocked the entrance. He leaned toward the peephole. Nothing. The hallway was empty. He frowned. Then realized something impossible. The breathing hadn't stopped. It wasn't coming from the hallway, it was coming from inside the room. Ryan slowly turned around. Nothing. The fireplace, the rocking chair, the wardrobe, everything looked normal. Then the rocking chair moved. Just once. A slow creak, forward, then backward, by itself. Ryan stared at it. His mouth went dry. The room was completely still again. Then his phone vibrated. He grabbed it immediately. There was no signal. No internet. No missed calls. Only one new notification. A voicemail. Received at 11:58 p.m. from an unknown number. Ryan pressed play. Static filled the speaker. Then a familiar voice, his own. Breathing heavily, almost whispering. Ryan, whatever you do, don't go to breakfast. The recording ended. Ryan froze. His phone screen went black. The battery hadn't died, it simply turned itself off. At that exact moment, the grandfather clock downstairs began striking. 1, 2, 3, its deep echoes rolled through the entire hotel. When the seventh chime rang, someone knocked again. This time from inside the wardrobe. Ryan couldn't take his eyes off the wardrobe. Silence returned. He tried to convince himself that everything happening was nothing more than exhaustion. 6 hours behind the wheel. A violent storm. Too little sleep. His imagination was simply running wild. Then, knock. 3 slow knocks came from inside the wardrobe. Knock, knock, knock. Ryan instinctively stepped backward. His hand reached for the doorknob. Open the door. Run. Get downstairs. But then he remembered the receptionist's warning. If someone knocks after midnight, don't open the door. She had never said anything about the wardrobe. Ryan gave a nervous laugh. This is ridiculous. Carefully, he stepped closer. The wardrobe doors were tightly shut. The room was perfectly still, no draft, no sound. He slowly reached out. His fingertips touched the cold wood. Then a familiar voice came from inside. Ryan, it was Chris. Help me, I'm in here. Ryan froze. Chris? They won't let me out. The voice sounded only inches away, as though Chris were standing directly behind the wooden doors. Open it, please, hurry. Ryan slowly pulled his hand back. Something wasn't right. The wardrobe was barely wide enough to hold clothes. A grown man couldn't possibly fit inside. The voice continued. They're coming. Please, open the door. Ryan closed his eyes. Then quietly stepped away. No. Silence. Then the voice changed, lower, rougher, almost inhuman. You're just like all the others. The temperature inside the room dropped instantly. The fire inside the fireplace disappeared. Every light went out. Only pale moonlight filtered through a narrow gap in the curtain. Then the wardrobe doors slowly opened by themselves. Inside, there were no shelves. No clothes, no back wall. Only darkness. Endless darkness. Far deeper than the wardrobe could possibly be. Ryan took another step backward. His back hit the room door. At that exact moment a bell rang downstairs. The small brass reception bell. Once, then again. And again. As though someone were repeatedly calling for the receptionist. Ryan cautiously leaned toward the peephole. The hallway was empty, but a newspaper now lay on the carpet. He was certain it hadn't been there before. Several seconds passed. Without a breeze, the newspaper slowly unfolded by itself. Its pages turned on their own. The front page headline read, "Couple disappears during mountain trip." Below the headline was a photograph. A smiling young man. A young woman standing beside him. Behind them, the very same building. Silver Pine Hotel. Ryan looked closer. The publication date read, July 18, 1986. His eyes continued scanning the page. Below the article was a list of people who had vanished over the years. Then the final name. Ryan's breathing stopped. Ryan Mitchell missing during road trip, date, tomorrow. At that exact moment, 3 slow knocks echoed from the hallway. Then the receptionist's calm voice drifted through the door. Mr. Mitchell, it's almost 7 o'clock. The other guests are already waiting for you. Ryan stood frozen, his own name, printed on tomorrow's newspaper. The room suddenly felt smaller. The walls seemed closer than before. Another knock. Slow. Patient. Mr. Mitchell, the receptionist called again. Breakfast is ready. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he looked at his watch. 6:58 a.m. His heart skipped a beat. How? Only a few minutes ago it had been just after midnight. He rushed to the window and pulled the curtains open. The storm was gone. A pale morning sun illuminated the mountains. Birds sang peacefully. The parking lot looked exactly as it had the previous evening. Except his car was gone. Only the old black pickup remained. Ryan stared in disbelief. No, he searched the entire parking lot. Nothing. His sedan had simply vanished. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. This time only once. Then the receptionist spoke again. You'll miss breakfast. Her voice sounded almost disappointed. Ryan stepped away from the door. His eyes landed on the wardrobe. It was closed again, as though nothing had happened. Then he remembered the voicemail. Don't go to breakfast. He looked around the room one last time. There had to be another way out. The window, he hurried toward it and pushed it open. Cold mountain air rushed inside. The drop wasn't very high. The room was on the 2nd floor. He could survive the jump. Without thinking any further, Ryan climbed onto the windowsill and jumped. He landed hard on wet grass. Pain shot through his ankle, but nothing appeared broken. He stood up immediately. The hotel towered silently behind him. No voices, no footsteps. No one followed. Ryan began running. Across the parking lot, toward the highway, toward freedom. He reached the road, his lungs burned. A pickup truck approached through the morning fog. Ryan waved both arms desperately. The driver stopped. A gray-haired man rolled down the window. "You all right, son?" Ryan nodded frantically. "Please, I need to get out of here." The driver looked toward the hotel. "What hotel?" Ryan pointed behind him. The old man frowned. "There isn't any hotel." Ryan turned around. The parking lot had disappeared. The building was gone. Only an empty field remained. Tall grass swayed gently in the morning breeze. Nothing else. Ryan slowly lowered his arm. "No." The driver studied him for several seconds. "You hit your head? There used to be an old hotel around here." The driver's expression changed. "My grandfather told me stories. He said a hotel called Silver Pine burned down in 1974. No one survived." Ryan felt every hair on his arms stand up. "That's impossible. I was just there." The old man remained silent. Then he reached into the glove compartment. "I found this years ago while hunting." He handed Ryan an old black and white photograph. Ryan's hands began trembling. The picture showed dozens of hotel guests standing on the front porch of Silver Pine Hotel. Everyone smiled at the camera. Everyone except one man. Standing in the back row, wearing modern hiking clothes. Holding a backpack. Looking terrified. Ryan. The date written beneath the photograph read, October 12, 1974, more than 50 years before Ryan had been born. Several weeks later Ryan finally returned home. His family assumed he had simply gotten lost in the mountain. No one believed his story. Life slowly returned to normal. Or at least it almost did. One rainy evening he decided to unpack the backpack he had taken on the trip. Everything inside was soaked, except one object. An old brass room key, attached to a faded leather tag. 217. Ryan stared at it for several long seconds. Then he noticed something engraved on the back. Very small. Almost impossible to read. It said, "We look forward to welcoming you back." At that exact moment, someone knocked 3 times on his apartment door. Ryan didn't move. He simply closed his eyes. And waited. Outside the knocking stopped. But somewhere very far away, a small brass reception bell rang once. Most people think they would notice danger immediately, a scream, a weapon, someone running toward them, but the most terrifying people are the ones who never appeared dangerous at all. Nathan Carter had worked late for nearly 3 weeks straight. By the time he left the office, downtown Chicago was almost empty. It was just after 11:30 p.m. Rain had fallen earlier that evening, leaving the sidewalks glossy beneath the streetlights. Nathan usually took the subway. Tonight, he decided to walk. His apartment was only 20 minutes away. The city felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. No traffic, no conversations. Only the distant hum of electrical transformers and the occasional gust of wind between the buildings. Nathan slipped his hands into his coat pockets and continued walking. He passed a small city park. Most of the lights inside had already turned off. Only one old lamp remained lit near the center pathway. Something beneath it caught his attention. Someone. A man. Standing perfectly still. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't smoking. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He simply stood beneath the light. His arms hung loosely at his sides. His head tilted slightly downward. Nathan slowed his pace. Then the man looked up. Their eyes met. Nathan expected the stranger to look away. He didn't. Instead he smiled. Not politely. Not naturally. The smile slowly stretched wider, far wider than any normal expression should. Nathan frowned. What the man never blinked. Not once. Even from across the street Nathan could tell. The stranger's eyes remained completely open, watching him. The smile never changed. Nathan looked around. The sidewalks were empty. No one else seemed to notice. He pulled out his phone. No signal. That didn't make sense. He was standing in the middle of downtown Chicago. His battery still had 70%. Yet the screen displayed only. Searching, Nathan looked back toward the park. The smiling man hadn't moved. Then, very slowly, he raised one hand. Not to wave, not to point. He simply lifted it until one finger rested against his own lips. Nathan felt a chill run through his body. A second later, every streetlight around the park went out. All at once. Darkness swallowed the sidewalk, only the single lamp above the stranger remained lit. Nathan took one step backward. When he looked again, the man was gone. Or so he thought. A quiet voice suddenly came from directly behind him. "So, you finally noticed me." Nathan spun around. No one was there. The sidewalk was empty. Rainwater shimmered beneath the streetlights. Cold wind whispered between the buildings. He took a slow breath. "Pull yourself together, you're just exhausted." He turned in a full circle. The park remained silent. The single street lamp still glowed. But the smiling man was gone. Nathan picked up his pace, step after step. Without looking back. A few minutes later, he reached a large intersection. The traffic lights were working. Strangely enough, there wasn't a single car on the road. Even this late at night, that didn't feel right. He was about to cross the street, when he noticed his reflection in the large glass window of a closed clothing store. At first, everything looked normal. Him, his coat, the empty sidewalk behind him. Then standing only a few feet behind his reflection was the same man. Completely still. Wearing the same impossible smile, Nathan immediately turned around. Nothing. The sidewalk behind him was empty. He looked back at the glass. The smiling man was still there, watching him. Nathan slowly stepped backward. In the reflection, the man copied him. But 1 second later, as though his movements lagged behind reality, a cold chill crawled down Nathan's spine. He quickly walked away from the storefront. His heart was pounding. This isn't possible. He pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. He dialed 911. The screen remained silent for several seconds. Then one message appeared. Call failed a moment later. The phone shut itself off. The battery had been nearly full. Ahead, a 24-hour coffee shop was still open. Warm light spilled onto the wet sidewalk. Nathan almost ran inside. The smell of fresh coffee immediately calmed him. Behind the counter stood a young barista. She smiled politely. "Good evening." Nathan glanced around. 3 other customers sat quietly at separate tables. Relief washed over him. Finally, other people. "Can I get a coffee?" "Of course." She started preparing his order. Nathan looked back toward the front window. The street outside was empty, no one. He finally allowed himself to relax. Then the barista quietly asked, "Is that your friend?" Nathan frowned. "My what?" She nodded toward the window. The man standing across the street. Nathan slowly turned his head. Across the road beneath another streetlight stood the same man. Much closer now. He wasn't moving. He was simply smiling, looking directly through the coffee shop window. Nathan quickly looked at the other customers. None of them seemed to notice anything unusual. "You can see him?" The barista looked confused. "Of course. He's kind of creepy. He's been standing there for about 10 minutes. I don't think he's blinked once." Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. So he wasn't imagining it. Slowly, the smiling man raised one hand, then pointed directly at Nathan. The barista took an uneasy step backward. "Is that normal?" Nathan didn't answer. The man slowly tilted his head. His smile stretched even wider. Then without taking a single step, without anyone seeing him move, he was suddenly closer. One moment he had been standing across the street. The next he was directly outside the coffee shop window. No one had seen him cross the road, no one had seen him walk. He simply was there. His eyes remained wide open, unblinking. Only the smile remained. Then very slowly he lifted one finger and gently tapped the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. The third tap echoed through the coffee shop. Then silence. No one moved. Nathan stared through the glass. The smiling man remained exactly where he was. His finger still rested against the window. His eyes never blinked. Not once. The barista forced a nervous laugh. "I'm going to call security." She reached for the phone behind the counter. The display lit up, then immediately went black. She frowned. "That's strange." She picked up the receiver anyway. Nothing. No dial tone. Nathan slowly stepped closer to the window. The smiling man hadn't moved. The rain had started again. Water streamed down the glass between them. For a moment, Nathan almost convinced himself the smile was an illusion. Then the man tilted his head, slowly, almost curiously. As though he were studying Nathan, the smile grew wider. It shouldn't have been possible. The corners of his mouth stretched almost to his ears. Yet his eyes remained completely empty. One of the customers finally noticed him. An elderly man sitting near the window lowered his newspaper. What in the world? He stood up, walked toward the entrance. Nathan immediately stepped in front of him. Don't. The man looked confused. What? Don't go outside. The customer chuckled. It's just some weirdo. He unlocked the door. The small bell above it chimed. Nathan grabbed his arm. Please. The old man gently pulled away. I'll be fine. He stepped outside. The smiling man didn't react. He simply watched. The old man walked directly toward him. Hey, you can't stand here bothering people. No answer. The smiling man remained perfectly still. Still smiling. The old man stopped only a few feet away. What are you? He never finished the sentence. His expression suddenly changed. His shoulders relaxed. The anger disappeared from his face. He smiled. A small smile at first. Then a little wider. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. The old man slowly nodded, as though someone had just whispered something into his ear. Without another word, he turned around, walked calmly back into the coffee shop, sat down, opened his newspaper, and continued reading, as if nothing had happened. Nathan hurried toward him. Sir. No response. Sir. The old man slowly looked up. His smile remained. It wasn't as wide as the stranger's, but it didn't belong on a human face. You should smile more, he whispered. Then he returned to reading. Nathan looked around the cafe. No one else seemed concerned. The barista had frozen. She stared through the window, her breathing slowed. Then she smiled. Nathan's pulse exploded. No, she quietly walked toward the entrance. Nathan caught her by the wrist. Don't go out there. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the smiling man. He looks happy. Her voice sounded distant, almost hypnotized. Nathan pulled her backward. The moment she lost sight of the window, she blinked rapidly, as though waking from a dream. What just happened? Nathan didn't answer. Because something far worse had happened. He looked outside again. The smiling man was gone. Every streetlight outside suddenly flickered. Once, twice. Then all of them turned back on. The sidewalk was empty. Nathan slowly backed away from the window. No, a quiet chuckle came from somewhere inside the coffee shop. Not outside. Inside. Very slowly, every customer lifted their eyes from what they were doing. Every single one of them was smiling. Nathan couldn't move. An unbearable silence filled the coffee shop. Every customer was staring directly at him. Every one of them was smiling. The exact same smile, wide, empty, completely emotionless, as if their faces had frozen into a single impossible expression. The elderly man was the first to stand. Slowly, very slowly, his newspaper slipped from his hands. He took one step forward. Then another. The young woman by the window stood up next. Then another customer. Even the barista quietly walked out from behind the counter. No one spoke. They simply looked at Nathan, and smiled. Nathan slowly backed away. What's wrong with you? No answer. Together they all took another step toward him. Nathan suddenly turned and ran. He threw the front door open. Cold night air hit his face. Behind him, the small bell above the entrance chimed. He glanced over his shoulder. Every customer was standing in the doorway. None of them came outside. They simply watched. Still smiling. As if they were waiting. Nathan ran. The rain-soaked pavement was slippery beneath his feet. He didn't care where he was going. He just wanted to get away. Several blocks later, he spotted a police cruiser. Without thinking, he ran directly into the street. The car slammed on its brakes. A police officer stepped out immediately. Sir, what are you doing? Please. Nathan struggled to catch his breath. Someone's following me. The officer studied him carefully. Calm down. Who is following you? Nathan turned around. The street was empty. The coffee shop was no longer even visible. He's smiling. The officer frowned. Who? Nathan raised his hand. There. Under the streetlight, across the street. The smiling man stood exactly where Nathan had expected him to be. Perfectly still. Wearing the same impossible smile. Look, he's right there. The officer looked across the road. Several long seconds passed, then he slowly turned back. Sir, I don't see anyone. Nathan felt his mouth go dry. He's standing right there. The officer looked again. Still nothing. At that exact moment, the smiling man slowly raised one hand. Then he waved. Not at Nathan, at the police officer. The officer suddenly froze, his eyes remained fixed on the empty sidewalk. Nathan immediately understood. The officer could see him now. Officer, don't look at him. Too late, the corners of the officer's mouth slowly began to rise. A smile spread across his face, slow, wide, wrong. He lowered his head slightly, then quietly said, "He seems friendly." Nathan stepped backward. No, the officer looked back up. But something had changed. The warmth had disappeared from his eyes. "Why aren't you smiling? He just wants everyone to be happy." Nathan turned and ran again. Behind him, the officer calmly called out, "Don't run, he'll find you anyway." Nearly 10 minutes later, Nathan rushed into a busy subway station. People hurried in every direction. Trains roared through the tunnels. Announcements echoed overhead. For the first time all night he felt safe. He walked toward a drinking fountain, splashed cold water onto his face, then slowly looked up. A large mirror hung on the wall in front of him. It reflected the entire station, passengers, ticket machines, turnstiles, and Nathan himself. Everything looked normal, until his reflection smiled, by itself. Nathan froze. He wasn't smiling, but the man in the mirror, who looked exactly like him, slowly stretched his lips into the same impossible grin. The real Nathan stumbled backward. His reflection didn't. It remained standing exactly where it was, still smiling. Then very slowly it raised one hand, inviting him to come closer. Nathan stared at his reflection. It continued smiling. He wasn't. Yet the man in the mirror slowly tilted his head, exactly like the stranger beneath the streetlight. Nathan took another step backward. This time the reflection stepped forward. Its hand pressed gently against the inside of the glass. Nathan's breathing became shallow. Then, the station lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. The mirror instantly reflected an empty subway station. Everyone was gone. The passengers, the ticket machines, even the security guard near the entrance. Only Nathan remained. And his reflection. Except the reflection was no longer copying him. It simply stood there, smiling. Nathan turned around. The station was still crowded. People hurried toward the arriving train. Someone laughed nearby. Everything looked perfectly normal. He slowly looked back at the mirror. The reflection had returned to normal. It copied his movements again. Nathan whispered, "No," then his phone vibrated. The screen had somehow turned back on. No missed calls. No signal. Only one notification. New contact added. Nathan frowned. He hadn't touched his phone. He opened the contact list. There was only one new name. Smiling Man. No phone number. No email. Just one note beneath it. "Smile back next time." Before Nathan could delete it, the screen went black. The train arrived. Nathan stepped inside. The doors closed. He sat near the back of the nearly empty car. Only 4 other passengers remained. A woman reading a book. A teenager wearing headphones. An elderly man asleep in the corner. And a businessman staring at his phone. Nathan closed his eyes. Maybe everything was finally over. The train entered a tunnel. The windows became dark mirrors. Nathan accidentally looked toward one. His reflection was smiling again. Only inside the window. Not in real life. He immediately looked away. One by one, every passenger lifted their eyes. No one smiled, not yet. But all of them were looking directly at him. The lights flickered. For one brief second every reflection inside every window wore the same impossible grin. Then the lights returned. Everything looked normal again. The passengers continued whatever they had been doing, as though nothing had happened. Nathan quit his job 2 weeks later. He moved out of Chicago, changed his phone number, deleted every social media account. He never spoke about that night again. Years passed. Nothing happened. Slowly, he convinced himself it had all been caused by exhaustion, stress, lack of sleep, until one evening, 5 years later, Nathan was grocery shopping in a small town hundreds of miles away. As he pushed his cart past the frozen food aisle, a little girl looked up at him. She smiled, a perfectly normal smile. Then she quietly asked, "Why didn't you smile back?" Nathan froze. Her parents continued walking. They hadn't heard her. The little girl slowly pointed toward the security mirror hanging from the ceiling. Nathan looked up. Everyone in the supermarket appeared normal, except one person, standing at the very end of the aisle, tall, perfectly still, wearing a long dark coat, smiling, the same impossible smile. The smiling man slowly raised one finger, and placed it against his lips. Shh! Nathan blinked. The aisle was empty. The little girl had already walked away. That night, Nathan covered every mirror in his house, every window, every reflective surface. He never uncovered them again. Neighbors eventually noticed something strange. No matter the weather, no matter the season, Nathan was never seen smiling. Not once. Because he had learned the final rule. The smiling man doesn't chase people, he waits patiently until someone smiles back. People say there is a crossroads somewhere in Mississippi. No map marks it, no road sign points toward it. Yet every generation seems to rediscover it. Some come searching for fame, others for revenge. A few simply want proof that the legend is real. Almost none of them talk about what they find. Logan Pierce never believed in curses. He believed in bad decisions, bad timing, and bad luck. At 28, he had already watched every dream fall apart. His band had dissolved, his father had died the previous winter. Bills kept piling up. Every recording studio rejected his music. One rainy evening, while helping clear out his late grandfather's attic, Logan discovered a dusty leather journal. Most of it contained ordinary family notes, crop records, weather observations, old recipes. Until one page caught his attention. Across the top, written in faded black ink, were the words, "If you ever become truly desperate, go to the crossroads at midnight." Below it was a rough hand-drawn map. No names, no distances. Only 4 dirt roads meeting beneath an ancient oak tree. At the bottom of the page, one final sentence had been underlined 3 times. Never accept what is offered before asking what has already been taken. Logan laughed. It sounded like another old Southern ghost story. Still, something about the map stayed in his mind. 3 nights later he found himself driving through the Mississippi countryside. Heavy rain hammered against the windshield. His GPS had stopped working nearly an hour earlier. The road narrowed into cracked asphalt, then gravel, finally dirt. His headlights barely pierced the thick fog gathering between the trees. Then he saw it. An enormous oak, standing completely alone. 4 empty roads crossed beneath its branches. There were no houses, no power lines, no signs of life. Only silence. Logan looked at the dashboard clock. 11:59 p.m. His engine suddenly shut off. The headlights remained on. The radio filled with loud static. Then everything went silent. Midnight. A gentle knock echoed against the driver's window. Logan turned his head. Someone stood beside the car. An elderly man, perfectly dry despite the rain. Wearing an old black suit, he removed his hat, smiled politely, and quietly asked, "So, what did you come here willing to lose?" Logan remained silent. The old man stood calmly beside the car. Rain poured through the headlights. Yet not a single drop touched the man's black suit. It was as if the rain simply refused to fall on him. "Who are you?" Logan finally asked. The old man smiled. "People call me many things. Some call me the devil. Others call me the keeper. The truth is, it doesn't really matter." He placed his hat gently against his chest. "What matters is what you want most." Logan stared at him. He was already regretting coming here. "This is some kind of joke, isn't it? Did someone send you?" The old man chuckled softly. His laugh was strangely calm, as though he had answered that question thousands of times before. "If you wish, you can simply leave." Logan immediately turned the ignition key. Nothing. He tried again. And again. The engine remained dead. The old man slowly walked toward the center of the crossroads. "Answer yourself honestly. If tomorrow, the whole world knew your music, would you finally be happy?" Logan lowered his eyes. He didn't answer. "What if I told you that by tomorrow evening, your songs would be playing across America? People would sing your lyrics. You would never worry about money again." Logan forced a nervous laugh. "And what would you ask for in return?" The old man looked directly into his eyes. "That is the right question. Most people never think to ask it." A long silence followed, then the stranger quietly said, "I don't take anything." Logan frowned. "What? People leave something here willingly. They choose the one thing they believe they can live without a voice, memories, a name, time, love, even fear. Everyone chooses differently. A cold shiver ran through Logan. If that's true, then why does every legend talk about selling your soul? The old man's smile widened. Because people love believing their soul is the most valuable thing they own. He slowly shook his head. They're almost always wrong. The wind suddenly stopped. A beckel silence surrounded the crossroads. Logan could hear only his own heartbeat. So, what do you want from me? The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly walked around the car, stopping beside the passenger door. Then quietly said, I already know what you're willing to leave behind. Logan felt ice crawl down his spine. No. I haven't decided anything. You already have. You simply don't know it yet. The old man reached into his pocket. He removed a small silver coin. Old, worn smooth with age. One side showed an enormous oak tree, the other 4 roads meeting beneath its branches. He held it out to Logan. Take it. If it's still in your pocket by sunrise, our agreement will be complete. If you place it back here, you'll forget this road forever, and you'll never see me again. After several long seconds, Logan accepted the coin. It felt warm, almost as if it had been resting beside a fire. The instant it touched his palm, the engine roared back to life. The headlights brightened. The radio began playing again. The old man stepped backward. Drive. You still have until sunrise. Logan pressed the accelerator. The car rolled away from the crossroads. In the rear-view mirror, the old man still stood beneath the oak tree, motionless, hat in hand, smiling. A few hundred yards later, Logan instinctively looked down at the coin in his hand. Something had changed. The image of the crossroads had disappeared. In its place, his own name had been engraved into the silver. Logan Pierce. As he stared, a second line slowly appeared beneath it. First payment received. Logan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. His heartbeat pounded louder than the engine. He glanced at the silver coin again. The words were still there. First payment received. No, he whispered. This isn't real. He rolled down the window. Without thinking, he threw the coin into the darkness. It disappeared into the rain. Logan sighed with relief. It's over. Or so he thought. 20 minutes later, he stopped at an old roadside diner. The neon open sign flickered above the entrance. Warm yellow light spilled through the windows. Inside, only a waitress and an elderly truck driver remained. The waitress smiled politely. Long night? You could say that. She poured him a cup of coffee. As Logan reached into his pocket for his wallet, his hand froze. The coin. It was there again, warm, resting exactly where it had been before. He slowly pulled it out. The engraving had changed. Beneath first payment received, another line had appeared. You tried to return it. Logan immediately shoved it back into his pocket. His hands began to shake. Everything okay? The waitress asked. Logan forced a smile. Yeah. Just tired. She nodded. You aren't the first traveler to come through here after midnight. Logan looked up. What do you mean? The waitress leaned against the counter. Every few years someone stops here. They all have the same look. Pale. Scared. And every one of them asks where the crossroads are. Logan slowly set down his coffee. You know about them? The waitress didn't answer. Instead, she quietly asked, did he give you a coin? Logan felt his stomach tighten. You've seen him. The waitress looked toward the rain outside. My father met him. So did my grandfather. Neither of them ever talked about what happened. But every year on this exact night they disappeared until sunrise. Then came home smiling. They were never the same again. Logan stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. I have to go. The waitress didn't try to stop him. She simply said, if you still remember what you truly wanted, you still have a chance. Logan frowned. What does that mean? But she had already turned away. Back inside the car, Logan tried to remember. Why had he driven to the crossroads? To become famous. Wasn't that it? He repeated the thought several times. Fame. Success. Music. Yet somehow the words felt strangely empty, as though they belonged to someone else. He frowned. No, there was another reason. Something important. Something deeply personal. He tried harder. His father's face appeared in his mind, then faded. His childhood home. Gone. His first guitar. Gone. Memories were slipping away, one after another. Like old photographs dissolving in rain. Panic spread through him. What is happening to me? Then the radio switched on by itself. Soft blues guitar filled the car. A voice calmly spoke between the notes. You've already started forgetting. Logan slammed the radio off. Silence. 3 seconds later, it turned itself back on, because your first payment wasn't the coin. Logan slowly looked toward the passenger seat. The silver coin was no longer in his pocket. It was lying beside him, standing upright, balanced on its edge. Without falling, the voice continued. You've already given me the reason you came. Logan stared at the coin. Then terror filled his face. He couldn't remember. Not at all. He no longer knew why he had gone looking for the crossroads. The last thing he heard before the radio fell silent was a quiet laugh. And one final sentence. People never notice what they've lost until they need it. Logan slammed on the brakes. The car skidded across the rain-soaked road. The silver coin still stood upright, perfectly balanced on its edge, completely motionless, as if an invisible hand was holding it there. The radio had fallen silent, but somehow, the silence felt even worse. He grabbed the coin, threw open the driver's door, and hurled it into the forest with all his strength. This time he watched carefully. The coin flew across the roadside ditch, struck the trunk of a pine tree, and disappeared into the wet leaves. It's over, it has to be over. Logan climbed back inside, locked the doors, shifted into gear, and drove away. Nearly 30 minutes later, lights appeared ahead. A small town. Logan felt relief for the first time all night. A gas station, a grocery store, a traffic light, civilization. He pulled beneath the gas station canopy. A young attendant stepped outside. Fill it up? Yeah. Logan handed him his credit card. The attendant inserted it into the payment terminal. A moment later he frowned. I'm sorry, sir, but this card doesn't belong to you. Logan laughed nervously. Of course it does. Try again. The attendant slowly turned the screen toward him. A different name appeared. James Carter. Logan blinked. No. My name is Logan Pierce. The attendant looked genuinely confused. Sir, are you sure? Logan quickly reached for his driver's license, then froze. The photograph was his. But the name wasn't. James Carter. He grabbed his passport. The same. His bank cards. The same. Even his signature had changed. Every document belonged to someone named James Carter. Logan Pierce no longer existed. This is impossible. The attendant took a cautious step backward. Sir, are you feeling okay? Logan didn't answer. He ran back to his car, opened the glove compartment. Family photographs spilled onto the passenger seat. Every picture showed him. But the people beside him were strangers. A different wife, different parents, a different house. It looked as though he had lived someone else's life. He desperately tried to remember. His mother, his father, his band, his friends. Their faces faded the harder he tried to recall them, as though they had never existed. His phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed, "Home with trembling hands." Logan answered. Hello? A woman's warm voice spoke. James, where are you? The kids are getting worried. Logan couldn't breathe. Who are you? Silence. Then she laughed softly. Honey, that's not funny. Come home. The call ended. Logan slowly looked into the rearview mirror. His blood turned cold. The silver coin was lying on the back seat. It had returned. The engraving had changed once again. Second payment received. Beneath it another sentence slowly appeared. You no longer remember who you were. Logan's heart nearly stopped. He looked at the dashboard clock. 5:58 a.m. Only minutes until sunrise. He slammed his foot onto the accelerator. He had to return to the crossroads before it was too late. He drove for 20 minutes. Then 30, then 40. The sun never rose. The sky remained completely black. The dashboard clock still read 5:58 a.m. Time had stopped. Then far ahead, his headlights illuminated the enormous oak tree once again. The same crossroads. Exactly where he had started. As though he had never left. Standing beneath the tree was the old man. Waiting, smiling. As if he had known Logan would return. The car rolled to a stop. The old man slowly removed his hat. Then quietly said, most people believe they can change their minds. He paused. But they always forget one important thing. The crossroads never lets go of someone who has already begun to pay. Logan slowly stepped out of the car. The rain had stopped. The forest was completely silent. Even the wind had vanished. Only the ancient oak stood above the crossroads. The old man waited beneath its branches, exactly where he had first appeared, as though no time had passed at all. Logan clenched the silver coin. I don't want any of it. I don't want the fame. I don't want the deal. The old man nodded politely. I know. They all say that. He looked toward the black sky. But you're no longer deciding whether to accept. You're deciding how much of yourself you wish to keep. Logan shook his head. There has to be a way to undo this. The old man's smile never faded. There is. Hope flashed across Logan's face. What is it? The stranger looked directly into his eyes. Remember what you came here for. Logan closed his eyes. He tried. With everything he had left, music, concerts, success, money, nothing felt real. There had been something else, something more important, someone, a face, a voice, a promise. But every memory slipped away before he could reach it. He slowly opened his eyes. I can't. The old man nodded. I know. The silver coin suddenly became burning hot. Logan cried out and dropped it onto the dirt road. Instead of falling, it landed upright. The oak tree began to creak. Its enormous branches moved although there was no wind. The old man quietly spoke. The final payment has arrived. The ground beneath Logan's feet trembled. Then the coin slowly sank into the earth. Without leaving a hole, without making a sound, the crossroads became silent once more. The old man placed his hat back on his head. You may leave now. Logan stared at him. That's it? The old man smiled. You've already paid. There is nothing left to collect. Logan looked around in confusion. He felt normal. No pain, no fear, no strange voices. He hurried back into his car. The engine started immediately. The dashboard clock finally changed. 5:59 a.m. Then 6 a.m. For the first time all night, the sun began to rise. Golden light spread across the trees. The crossroads disappeared in his rearview mirror. 3 months later, a young guitarist named Daniel Brooks stood on the stage of a crowded blues festival. Reporters called him the greatest new musician in America. His songs topped every chart. Fans knew every lyric. Interviewers always asked the same question. How did you become so talented overnight? Daniel always smiled. I honestly don't know. It just happened. That same evening, driving home after the concert, Daniel noticed an old leather journal sitting on the passenger seat. He was certain it hadn't been there before. Curious, he opened it. Most of the pages contained faded handwriting, crop records, old recipes, weather notes. Then one page stopped him. Across the top were the words, if you ever become truly desperate, go to the crossroads at midnight. Beneath them a rough hand-drawn map. Daniel frowned. Something about it felt strangely familiar. Almost like a memory. He couldn't explain why. Hundreds of miles away in a quiet Mississippi town, a gas station attendant watched an elderly man walk in just before sunrise. The old man wore a black suit, carried an old-fashioned hat, and smiled politely. Good morning, the attendant said. The stranger nodded. Morning. Passing through? The old man glanced toward the highway. No. I'm waiting. For someone? The old man smiled a little wider. No. For everyone. Epilogue. Years later, people still argued about the legend of the Devil's Crossroads. Some believed it granted impossible talent, others insisted it was nothing more than folklore. But no one noticed the one detail shared by every version of the story. No one ever returned saying they had made a deal, because no deal was ever made. The crossroads never asked people to sell their souls. It simply waited until they became desperate enough to forget what truly mattered. And once they forgot, they walked away believing they had won, without realizing they had already become the next story someone else would someday tell.